Hey everyone, welcome back to Tales of the PowerAge. You can see from the slide of tonight we're going to be talking about Kiss and two of the iconic tours from 83 and 84. So we're going to be taking you right the way back to the early 80s. And ironically, only 10 years after Kiss had formed. Even at the time, it probably felt like they'd been going 50 years to us. And we've been having conversations about that. So Kiss, well, they've sold over 100 million albums worldwide. They are currently on their end of the road tour, and I scooped up a lovely sweatshirt for the final 50 shows, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. They've had various lineup changes over the years. The classic lineup, of course, is Gene, Paul, Peter, and Ace, but we won't be talking about Ace and Peter on this one because there were some different members, which the boys will be covering. And what's interesting about these tours, and in particular Lick It Up, the makeup came off on September the 18th, 1983. And this was a massive thing for Kiss because what differentiated the band, I guess arguably, versus other rock bands of that period was the show and the whole persona of the band and the mystery of what they looked like and the makeup, etc. But I think they were really striving to be taken seriously after 10 years of makeup on and trying to be something different. So on September the 18th in the States, they revealed themselves, what they looked like in real life, to everyone's delight, obviously. And then literally 1 month later, they were here in the UK touring, which is incredible to think.
That really is amazing. I didn't fully understand that in real time.
And it was the first time we've been to the UK in 3 years, guys. So a couple of the guys on the pod were at that gig at Wembley Arena. So I'll say hi to everyone first. So hi guys, how you doing?
Evening.
All right. So okay, so we're going to go to Gavin, to the slides, and maybe just there are a couple of things you can see. They look the same, but they look different, obviously, without the makeup on. Well, there was makeup on, but not in the way that we
without the white and black makeup on.
Yeah. So look, Gav, I know you're a big Kiss fan, and these are probably copies of your records. Do you want to just maybe give a quick overview of those?
Yeah, the UK just got Lick It Up as a single. And I think then later on, All Hell's Breaking Loose. There were definitely 2 promo videos, weren't there, for that? But the UK didn't get the promo video for All Hell's Breaking Loose for whatever reason. Or they didn't get the single or other. But yeah, that's quite collectible, the shaped tank. I haven't got it actually, Dill.
Oh, right, okay.
No, I want it. If anyone's got cheap one going free, let me know.
Hey.
But yeah, that was there wasn't much song and dance about the single as far as I recall. I remember seeing the album the first time I saw them without makeup. I didn't check the dates as to whether the single came out before the album. Jam, do you know that?
I didn't buy it. No.
I've got it on 12-inch actually.
All right. Quite often we seem to have missed the singles. It wasn't quite as obvious back in the day. You had to be in the record store to see the single or see it in Kerrang or Sounds or whatever. But I don't recall, because this would have been the big reveal. So I imagine the album came out before the single, just for that point, Yeah,
and it was probably there's no probably about it. It was a better picture on the album than it was in the single, wasn't it?
Yeah, so, the album picture's brilliant. Yeah, really fantastic. It does what it needs to do, just make it nice and simple.
So, Gappy, thoughts on the album? I know you're a big lover of this era of Kiss.
Absolutely.
In particular, Lick It Up and Animalize. So, any thoughts on the album?
Yeah, absolutely. I'd heard. I hadn't heard the album at all before. My girlfriend at the time, Lisa, her sister Emma, who was in our year at school, as you all know, because we all know her. She actually had the album, and I went around her house to see her sister, and she produced this album. And I thought, bloody hell, I haven't seen this. And I hadn't seen them without the makeup. I didn't know they were going to take the makeup off. And I saw this, and I was lent it, as you did in those days. And I thought, absolutely, this album's brilliant. The only albums I'd heard up to that point were Destroyer and The Elder, which my main man, Gav, in the corner there, had recorded me on a mixtape in about 1981, one of his mixtapes that he did for me, but that was one of the second one. Destroyer's amazing album. The Elder got knocked a bit, but I still love it. I love it today, and it's brilliant. But Lick It Up is an amazing album. It's really, really, really heavy for Kiss, in my opinion, but I think it's great.
Brilliant. Okay, Jam, do you remember getting the album?
Yeah. And for me, as Gappy just said, the actual guitars on it were so. I thought they were so heavy. Exciter, the way it starts, the way the record starts, is just awesome. The cover, I thought that painted Gene. I thought Gene looked awesome when I saw that. I was like, I look at that and I'm like, Gene. I mean, you almost think if you look for creativity, I imagine he was involved heavily in the photograph that was placed on the front. Cracking album. I loved it. Really, really loved it. Got it literally as soon as it came out, and I've been waiting for it, and I was really pleased.
Okay, cool. Gav?
Yeah, the main thing, apart from how they looked, was the quality of the songs, I thought. Obviously, Vinnie Vincent having quite a lot of input in the songwriting of the album, giving him a real shot in the arm. And, he's got his critics now, but man, did they need him at the time. And this album stands up for me as one of the most consistently brilliant album they've ever done, makeup or not. It's just great. And I know they were coming off the back of trying to be heavier and trying to be more of a rock band. And they certainly achieved it with this. And, so you could mourn the makeup going, but you found yourself with a really strong album. So it kind of took the edge off a little bit.
So the album was a success it was a big gamble taking the makeup off and changing their image massively, because they were arguably the biggest band in the world in the 70s. They certainly were in the States, in Australia, and much of the world. So the copy in Japan was very different, Gav, wasn't it? I think you've got a picture of it here. And probably
good shout. And how they got away with this, I'll never know. These aren't bootlegs. These aren't unofficial.
I've never seen that before.
No. So as in a previous episode, I think I showed the Elder version, and I think I showed.
You did, yeah.
I think I showed this as well. But they continue to have the band in makeup on the album covers when the band weren't going in that direction. They were trying to go in a different visual way. Obviously with the Elder was the door and the hand, but Japan got a really cool makeup cover. And with this, so this was, I think this was a bit more strategic, that you had to buy the album to see the reveal. Whereas over here, you didn't have to buy it. You just saw it in the store. So that's quite clever. I think that may have been the theory behind it, but still really cool to have that image on there, and you have to then reveal it, when you get it out of the shrink, if they have shrink in Japan.
And so, Japan loved their glam rock bands as well. I mean, I know Pano Rocks were never to the level that Kiss were, but that was the only country that they really made it in, actually, Japan, funnily enough.
Yeah.
They seem to like that sort of that makeup style, that femininity in a band, didn't they, in Japan in those days?
I guess because it's so rebellious, and the Japanese traditionally maybe a little bit more reserved, and so they love the craziness of it. But Kiss were already absolutely massive. And
the program was probably a throwback to Love It Loud, wasn't it, with the tank? So I think you've got a copy of that, Gav, haven't you?
Yeah, I mean, the one thing that is noticeable about the program is just how huge it is. Do they not think about how the hell you're going to get this home in one piece? Because I didn't.
And the later ones are even bigger. The ones
surely that rip happened after the effect.
Yeah, it did. Yeah, I treasured it for years. But again, what I haven't mentioned was this tour was my first tour, my first gig. So Jam had already been to Donington, I reckon.
No, not in 83.
84 he went.
Oh, 84. So this wasn't your first gig though, was it?
It wasn't. Oh, come on to that.
I won't steal your thunder, but
you went to Michael Schenker, didn't you? Before?
We will come on to that.
Anyway, yeah, it's a decent program. It's better than the next one we're going to talk about. So, but that image on the front is just brilliant. It's just iconic. That's why.
So before we go on to the gig itself and that show at Wembley Arena, I think we've mentioned a few times there were a big bunch of us at school, and we all like various bands. And funnily enough, just thinking about this band in particular, they were probably the number one band for most people at school at that time. So I think across a lot of people, they were their favourite band. Now I didn't go to this gig. I was probably more of an AC/DC fan. Well, there's no probably about it. I was, and I probably got into Kiss more in later life. I didn't see them till 88, but this was a real treat for these guys to go and see Kiss in 83. And I know certainly, Jam, you've been looking forward to it, hadn't you?
I mean, it was due to be my first gig, and it was thanks to Kiss that I got to go to my first gig the night before this, because MSG were playing London Town, and there was Michael Schenker at the time, massive, the whole UFO thing and Scorpions. Michael Schenker was a big draw, and he was playing at Hammersmith Odeon on the Sunday night, Sunday the 23rd of October. Of course, Kiss then announced they were coming to town. First time since 1980. It's like, Kiss are coming. Oh my gosh. Kevin, my older brother, who at this time is like 18, 19, him and all his mates, they had tickets for Michael Schenker on the Sunday night. Of course, they had to get tickets for Kiss, so they got tickets for Kiss. And I begged my mum, can I please go to Kiss? It's Kiss. They're going to have no makeup. My mum's like, what? Okay. So I get to go. But then, of course, my brother then's like, well, we've got to go to Schenker, and we've got to go to sell our tickets to a tout. So he got tickets for the Saturday night for Schenker. So suddenly they had to rearrange and go on the Saturday. They thought someone was going to be able to go, but then they dropped out, and then, hey, I can come. So I got to go the night before to Schenker. So that was a hell of a weekend. So that was how it turned out. My first and my second gigs all at the one weekend.
Brilliant. Great memories, Jam.
Awesome.
Any memories of the gig itself? I mean, it's such a long time.
Yeah, so many. It's it's absolutely mad. Kiss for me, they weren't my number one band. I don't know if I've mentioned on here before, but Saxon I was quite keen on, a bit of Saxon and Queen. However, Kiss were massive. Alive 2 was what I'd been brought up on, and I laid on my bed dreaming of seeing that show one day. So really looking forward to it. Loved the album. I was so looking forward to seeing them without makeup. My older brother Kevin had seen them in 1980 because he tells the story how he fell off his chair because he was in the stalls, and there was seats in the stalls at Wembley Arena in 80. And he said it was amazing, and Ace was this, and the makeup was amazing. So suddenly Kiss were coming to town. But makeup, that was back in the day, older bro. They're coming now. They don't wear makeup. They're more about music. So I'm like, this is what it's all about. And he's like, that's a shame. So I went off. We were at the back of Block 3. I remember it well. So it's right. We were literally in the back row, and it did not matter one jot because they more than fill the Wembley Arena stage. It was just fantastic. They hadn't come since 80. They didn't tour Creatures of the Night, which I love that record. It's the start of them really, it was the start of them actually getting really heavy again.
Yeah.
After the disco years. So I was full of this. I was so looking forward to this. And as far as I know, we'll come on to the set list soon, I'm sure. But they played all my favourite tracks. Everything I wanted to hear, I heard. I was a sucker for "I Still Love You" off a Creatures record. I loved it, and I'm not a ballad man, but Paul's vocals and that are just immense. And when I hear that track, I'm not going to lie. Since oh my gosh, that's 40. No, it can't be.
Nearly 40 years.
Since this happened,
9.5 years. But only 10 years after they started, and they've been going 50 years.
Madness. But I heard that when I hear "I Still Love You," I can still picture it back then. It was so good.
So you guys have been part of Kiss's touring fan club for 40 years, or 80% of their time in the business. That's not bad, is it?
That's very scary.
Yeah. Loyalty there.
I got both of these T-shirts as it happens, and obviously I have neither left now. I was gutted about that. And I know, so as far as the actual gig, it was immense. My brother was, and we went to get to his car afterwards. We've driven up. When we got back there, the whole street where we parked, everyone's car had been broken into. This is the 80s, don't forget, and you're in London. He had a very impressive stereo with a graphic equalizer, which is what he said was why his music was such great quality. Well, it used to deafen me. It scared me. It was so loud. We had a quiet journey because his was one of the cars that had been broken into, and he'd had his graphic equalizer stolen, which at the time cost 50 quid. He'd saved up a lot of money to get that. Yeah, it cost 50 quid. I'm guessing his weekly wage was probably something like that. Might not have been as much. That might have been 30 or 40 quid. This is 40 years ago. And I remember, and I was gutted for him. I was so upset for him. I'm the little bro. I'm thinking, and he literally said, I won't say what he said because I don't know, but he said, "Oh, darn it. I don't care." He said, I do not. Yeah, you all know my bro. He wouldn't say that. So I don't care. That gig was brilliant. It's worth 50 quid on a graphic. I can save and get another one in a few months. So yeah, it's a great night for me. Really enjoyed it.
Brilliant.
I can just imagine Kevin saying that as well.
Just to put a bit of context around that, the ticket was £5.50. So he could have gone almost another 10.
Yeah, that's a good point, Bill.
Yes, that's a good thank you, deal. That makes that can put it into context.
Yeah.
So Gav, you'd been, I think you've been into KISS a couple of years, haven't you? Up until
I was thinking probably KISS,
couple or 10.
KISS, Magnum, Priest, some of the earliest bands that I got into, probably Maiden as well to a lesser extent. But yeah, KISS were always there right from primary school. I don't know when I first got into them, but I conservatively say I was 10. And as Jam said, the Kiss Alive 2 gatefold, show that to a 10-year-old, and say this actually happens. You can see this with your own eyes. It's a real thing. It's the same story for most people in that album. But me and my friend Neil used to kind of study the album and listen to it back to back, try and play drums to it, even at that tender age. And so KISS were massive for me. And I did follow them. I bought the Elder when it first came out, which I didn't mind, same as Gappy. It doesn't bother me like it bothers most people, maybe because it was the first album I bought new. But yeah, this was a big deal for me. I mean, not only was it my first gig, it was Wembley Arena. It was just iconic if you're English, British. You have to be a big band to play there. And, I did want to see him in makeup. I confess I did want to see him in makeup. But when they came on and rocked the place, it was fine. I got over it in about 30 seconds, and they did have the Creatures of the Night tank as the drum riser. So that kind of harked back to stuff I'd seen. Absolutely brilliant. No problem at all. And that was my first gig. Like Jammy, my second gig was only a few weeks later, Judas Priest at Hammersmith Odeon. So I was living the dream back then.
Happy days. And do you want to go on to the set list, Gav? I think on the next, anything you want to draw out of that?
Yeah, well, support bands we don't really dig into much, but certainly got a soft spot for Heavy Petting.
Until they did the Eurovision Song Contest.
Until they
tried to do it, but they didn't do it very well.
No, they did Song for Europe and failed at the first hurdle.
Exactly, yeah. Well, we all watched it though, didn't we? We all watched it.
I taped it on Wogan. And Wogan saying the band consists of Punky Mendoza, a fine Irish name or a fine Scottish name.
Typical Wogan.
Yes,
brilliant.
Yeah, it was brilliant. Anyway, so I don't really remember much about them, but it was, were they on before Helix? I can't remember. So one of those two was the first band I ever saw in concert. Anyway, $5.50 was my ticket. I think I've been looking at the set list just in awe, really. It's perfect blend of the newer songs and the older songs. I can't really, apart from getting rid of the solos, I probably couldn't.
I'd have liked to have seen Vinny's solo. He's immense. He's like the shred machine of shredding.
Well, that was a portent of things to come, wasn't it? Is that he did too much shredding and pissed off Paul.
Yeah.
So tried to take too much of the limelight. But I'm never one for a bass solo. The drum solo was fine in this case.
It must have been better than Paul's guitar solo, though, surely.
Yeah. Oh God, yeah. But the drum solo was a thing in itself. Because the drum solo had the tank moving around, I think, and the turret going up and down. Pyro.
Yeah, that sounds good. Really. Was Gene still spitting blood on the bass solo? Can you not remember?
I don't think he did it.
I don't.
That's a good question, Dill. I don't know. I thought he did. But
I don't. I don't.
He certainly didn't in '84.
Well, he probably didn't in '83 then.
Please comment down below.
Yeah. I'm sure somebody knows. Okay, well, look, so that was a big success. And then guess what? Less than 12 months later, they were back on these shores again, producing their next album, Animalize. Oh, I hope I said that right. I've been struggling.
Animalize, I think you meant
to say that. So, Gav, again, a couple of singles. I love Heaven's on Fire, by the way. Me and Gappy were singing away to that in Download last year to KISS and having the best time. So, do you want to just cover off these couple of singles?
Yeah, again, same format as before. The Heaven's on Fire was the lead single and the only single in the UK. Again, correct me if I'm wrong down below. But the other territories had various other singles, including that one, which I think was the Netherlands. But yeah, no, there weren't a big singles band at the time, and you know, I think it always surprises the rest of the world that Crazy Nights was such a big hit in the UK because it wasn't anywhere else. But so yeah,
right? Didn't know that.
Yeah, no, they play it over here. They don't tend to play it anywhere else.
Just got caught in time though, didn't it? It was one of those songs that it streamed, didn't it, for whatever reason?
But that was a massive hit over here, and that's if you said, you know, name a Kiss song to most people, they'd say Crazy Nights over here.
Yeah. In the UK, they would. Yeah. Okay, so that was they were the singles. The album came out, I think, before the tour. So again, it just shows how hard they were working at the time. And there's some not necessarily, well, maybe a bit of controversy, but there's a bit of a story around guitarists and lead guitarists because Vinny had departed the band, and we had this offering with a new guitarist. Gappy, do you want to just give your reflections on the guitarist that was involved in this album, and maybe just remind everyone what his real name was?
Well, in those days I didn't know, but I've since come to know that his real name is actually Mark Norton, not Mark St. John. But of course, Mark St. John sounds much more metal, doesn't it? And much more rock and roll. So I think they changed his name for that reason. But I didn't know the album when we went to see him. I went with a guy from school who we all know called Barnsley to the gig. But I didn't know the songs on the album before we went. All I knew was Heaven's on Fire because I had the 12-inch. Because that must have come out before we went.
Right.
It was going to be the first time I'd seen Kiss. So I don't really know much about the album. I'll talk about the album later. So can we go on to something else?
Okay, Gav, do you want any reflections of the album?
Yeah, I thought it was okay. I didn't think it was as strong as Lick It Up by any means. Heaven's on Fire is okay. No, I don't know this album inside out, which is kind of tells the story really. I know Lick It Up inside out, and I know all their other, well, most of their other albums, but no, this one never really touched me. I've got more to say about it. I just don't want to tread on Gappy's toes.
Okay, Jan, any other thoughts about the album?
Well, for me, when I was making notes, I thought it was a shocker. But obviously, I'm not going to say that live on here. It's poor.
No, you just said it.
I know it's a poor album. In
Gene and Paul.
My opinion, Gav just hit the nail on the head for me. I know Lick It Up like the back of I know that really well.
Listen, I'm sure Gene doesn't mind as long as you bought it.
No, I bought it I bought it immediately, and for me, I was like, I thought the cover was the opposite of Lick It Up. We know what I said about Lick It Up. The cover, I thought that's interesting. And I just
on
thought,
that point, I think that's possibly one of the worst covers of all time.
Have you seen Asylum?
Well,
Sorry.
yeah.
Or any album by Riot.
Okay.
Oh, actually, there is a bit of trivia before I forget.
Yeah. Oh.
Mark St. John is the only person never to have appeared on a Kiss album cover.
That's cool.
Yeah, he's on the back though.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you could argue he made it.
It's not a cover.
No, for me, the record, it wasn't a strong record. And I wonder, I don't know how quickly they knocked that together when you consider the release of that.
Probably quickly in the tour. Yeah.
Yeah. You know.
So got to be, hasn't it? Got to be.
Yeah. Okay. So they came back to the UK less than 12 months before they played him after a 3-year hiatus before that. So really feeling, I think, really feeling an urge to get on the, not necessarily the bandwagon, but maybe it was with MTV starting to steamroll, and there being an uplift in, let's be honest, certainly in the States and in the UK and Europe, an uplift in metal's popularity, and I think they were certainly trying to get on the back of that, or the record company were. So they released another tour in the UK. Interestingly for Kiss, and not all bands tend to play some of the random venues that they have in time, but they played Paul on the Lick It Up tour, and on the Animalize tour they played the St Austell Coliseum in Cornwall, of all places. I only ever really remember Quo and I think Maiden ever playing Cornwall, so it's quite odd that a band from the States were down in deepest Cornwall playing. It's fantastic. And actually, on the end of the road tour, they're playing Plymouth Argyle Stadium, home park. So I don't know, maybe they've got some friends down in the southwest, but clearly they like it down there. So that's a bit of a random thing looking back on it. So let's go to the tour. Gaps, I'm going to come to you. What do you remember about the gig and leading up to it?
The gig was amazing for me because it was my first time at Wembley Arena. I've been to a few gigs in '84. '84 was the first time I started going to gigs, but it was the first time I went to Wembley Arena, and I went to Wembley Arena before I went to Hammersmith Odeon. So I was really, really looking forward to this.
Yeah, they did 2 nights as well, by the way, at Wembley Arena on this tour.
They did how many? 2?
Yeah,
I can't remember which one I went to. I remember exactly where I was sat. I was sat on the left of the stage, really quite close to the stage, but on the left in the seats. The best thing about this tour, about this gig, I remember, is Gene had a penchant for doing. When anyone who knows Gene Simmons, he always sort of used to point, and then he used to go like this, and he did it all the time. And he pointed at me as I was going mental to one of the songs. Well, I thought he pointed at me anyway. He might have pointed at my mate or someone behind me. Who cares? I thought he pointed at me, and it was brilliant. And and that was superb. And just to see him strutting about the stage, his legs are so long. Absolutely amazing. That axe bass he played was just so good.
Yeah, it's cool.
Being a bass player, that's just and unlike the other guys, probably I actually loved the bass solo he did in that. It was absolutely amazing, and he got the crowd going with it as well. So it was really, really good.
He's a star. Look, whatever you say about Gene, awesome. And I love him. You can't help but smile. I'm
more of a Gene fan than a Paul fan, put it that way.
I am too. I think he's great fun. And do you know what? But just by doing that and that, he's created a memorable moment for you that's lasted nearly 40 years and will last probably another 40 years. So, yeah, well, that's brilliant. That's a great thing to think. So, Jan, what do you remember from the gig?
Well, if a bass player in Gappy doesn't love a bass solo, we're screwed. So I'm glad he does. Always cracks me up that Gav, as a drummer, doesn't like drum solos too much. Unless
he does. Some drum solos he likes.
No, for me, after the big build up for literally less than a year ago, this one was a little bit less. We were getting experienced in this malarkey, weren't we? This is the end of the first year. We've been to 10 gigs in that previous year, from October '83 through to this one. We've been to 10 shows. We've seen many a band. And yeah, for me, the Animalize record, I bought it on its release. It wasn't a Lick It Up, and it certainly wasn't a Creatures of the Night or any of that came before. And I was quite excited for the support band, but we'll come on to that in a minute. But just in a bigger context, Kiss were having hassles. They were changing their guitarists a lot. They didn't tour Creatures, as we mentioned before, and one of the reasons was because of the ticket sales weren't going like they should. But the UK, we wanted them a lot. They were made so welcome here, and I wonder if that's why they added your random venue, because they could sell tickets in St Austell, Coliseum in Austell. They could do 2 nights at London Wembley Arena, and it wasn't like that. From what I can gather, we might be able to be corrected by some real knowledgeable Kiss dudes in the comments, but I think they were having a tricky time coming into this next phase of where we were at, as you said, deal with MTV and that. But for me, as we saw the previous set list, the year before had 5 Lick It Up tracks, 4 Creatures, and then a smattering of awesomeness as well. This time round, they literally had exactly the same set list, except they slipped 3 we've slipped 3 Animalize songs in place of Gimme More, Exciter, and Firehouse.
Yeah.
So for a major rock band to play pretty much the same set list, but just 3 tracks different, interesting in itself. But that brings us on perfectly to the
sorry, Jam, can I just say, did they play Whole Lot of Love in '83 then?
No, that doesn't count, because I never look at covers. I don't even listen to them.
No.
Sorry, I didn't. I just discounted.
I think they did Lick It Up and Rock and Roll All Night, didn't they? I think that was the last song in '83, and just from looking at some of the stuff. So just before I come to you, Gav, and you can touch on for the eagle-eyed of you, you'll have noticed there's quite a fairly big and famous support that night. I'll come to you, but this is Gav talks about the support band in a minute, just think about this lineup for some of these venues: Brighton, Southampton, St Austell in Cornwall, Manchester, Glasgow, Edinburgh, which you'd expect, Newcastle maybe, Leicester, Ipswich, Stafford, Leeds, and then of course London. 2 nights in London. I mean, come on,
it's amazing. Yeah,
come on. So it's small venues. I mean, some of those venues are probably 2,000 seaters. What Bon Jovi were headlining Donington 3 years later. I mean, wow. So,
literally.
Gav, what do you remember?
Well, I was just going to go back to the program actually because it kind of
because of the guitarist
tells a story of the guitarist. Yeah, you know, we've got that. We've got the merch sheet still intact.
Nice.
Of course.
Which is if you want a program, that'll set you back £3, which is brilliant. But anyway, the program focuses on each member and a part of their body. You've got Paul's tat. You've got Gene's, which is in tattoos world.
Gene's coffee.
I would be gutted if it wasn't his tat.
Paul's tat.
Can I just say, sorry to interrupt, but you say the program was £3.
Yeah.
The ticket was £5.50, and you had to pay £3 for a program.
Yeah.
That's why I never bought a program.
Yeah, and do you know what? In today's, most tickets are around £100 in a venue like that. The equivalent would be paying £80 for a program.
Don't tell Gene and Paul that, will you?
Anyway, we come to young Mark's part of his body that he wants us to talk about, and sadly, it's his hand.
Yeah.
Because Kiss is the voice of the people, and I do my talking with my hands. Mark. Well, sadly, he got arthritis in such a severe way that he couldn't do the tour.
That's right.
So, although he's on all in the program and on the tour iconography, because if you have a look at the advert, that's Lick It Up with him blue tacked on the top of over the top of Vinnie Vincent there. It's the same picture.
Yeah.
But and we didn't get that dude. So another kind of letdown to Jammy's point. When you got there, it was like, who's that cat? I got used to the idea that it was going to be a different guy, but a different guy again. And apparently he had hand problems after the album, but there were problems recording the album as well, in that he couldn't replicate the same solo twice, which was necessary when recording. So Paul was frustrated with him then, and apparently Paul did some of the extra guitar stuff. But yeah, that wasn't why he got kicked out. He eventually got kicked out because of he couldn't play. They've just released, actually, interestingly, a recording of a gig he did play, and I think he did a very few single number of gigs before they got Bruce Kulick in to replace him. But they're doing From the Soundboard, the kind of official bootlegs. They've done one from Poughkeepsie in '84. Yeah,
it's supposed to be really good, isn't it?
Which is supposed to be really good, yeah. So that would be interesting. I'll be worth a listen to see what he would have been like. But there's no flies on Bruce Kulick. He's an amazing guitarist, as his brother was as well. And his brother had a long association with Kiss way back in the day. He even played on some albums unofficially, including the Fourth Side of Alive 2. But so that was probably Bruce's was a recommendation from his brother, and then stayed in from then on and did a great job of a Kiss guitarist, not the flamboyant extrovert that they normally have, but a good solid player.
And any thoughts on the gig? Any memories from the gig, Gav, from that one in particular? I mean, obviously, we've not really touched on Bon Jovi. Any quick thoughts?
No, I put the Bon Jovi set list in there just because it's a curiosity, really. They didn't have the big hits at that point. I think nobody really knew who they were, but they were impressive. I do remember that. I remember them
being impressive.
You do?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. They didn't have the songs then, but they had the balls and the gusto. They were rocking it, and all they needed was the songs, which they got.
And if you look at that set list, they still did a guitar solo, and they only had 6 songs and a guitar solo in them. It's ridiculous.
Because they didn't have enough songs.
Yeah.
Yeah. But meteoric rise to fame, which we've mentioned before, but just 3 or 4 years later, the biggest band in the UK.
So that was the gig. and a resounding success for the three of you that went. So that's fantastic, and a brilliant ticket. Those mid 80s, and they were the same in the 70s actually. Those Wembley Arena tickets like that, they look great, don't they? What a ticket that is compared to the Hammersmith Odeon tickets a few years later.
At least it's a proper ticket, yeah.
Yeah. So if you go to the next slide, Gav, I think you've got a couple of T-shirts from the tour as well. And those eagle-eyed of you should be able to notice a difference from the raglan or baseball shirt versus the T-shirt. So
yeah, another copy and paste job. The art department of their record company is getting good at this with switching out guitarists. But yeah, so you've got a different guy there at the back. For I guess when the tour progressed, they had to switch it out.
Yeah.
But yeah, one of their best T-shirts, I reckon, which Gappy had for many years. The two guitar crossed. That was on the back, wasn't it? The guitars were on the back and the lady on the front.
Yeah, lady was on the front. What a fantastic T-shirt that was.
It is a brilliant T-shirt. I might have to try and get a replica of that.
I just wore it to death, as you do in those days.
Yeah, that is such a great design all round. Yeah.
I'm sure you'll be able to find that somewhere in the depths of their store.
Yeah, for about 800 quid.
Yeah, and as I mentioned at the beginning, they may have sold 100 million albums, but they've probably sold $1 billion worth of merchandise in various forms. So they've been the absolute masters of that, haven't they?
And they still roll on today, don't they?
Including toilet rolls in Australia.
Yeah, it's amazing. So look, two tours. Really successful. Jan, was there anything else you wanted to add on the tour?
I was just pleased. Two things. Firstly, it was a tricky time. When you went to London with a bigger brother, lots of people in London didn't watch the support band. We've discussed this before.
Yeah.
Lots of empty seats because they were having a beer. Jovi needs to be watched. And I remember going because I wanted to see Jovi. And I remember my brother saying, why would you do such a thing? And as the years go on, and you realise how much he loved Bon Jovi, that was a tick for 14-year-old me. And also, I'm just really chuffed that Gappy, even back in those days, cementing his position as the ladies' man with the lady on the T-shirt. So it's always good to from an early time, he was clearly the ladies' man.
And if anyone has watched any of our previous pods, they'll notice that Gappy's actually remembered something from this gig, which is always a good one. So it must have been good for anyone.
Crack me up.
So Gav, if you can just go to the next slide. Look, thanks. Great chat tonight, guys. Really, really good to go back 40 years and talk about Kiss back in the day in a real transitional period for them. But if you enjoyed that, please find us on Facebook, Tales from the PowerAge. You can find us online at www.talesfromthepowerage.com. And if you really loved what you saw, you can nip onto redbubble.com merchandise, TFP PowerAge. There's some great stuff on there. So thanks as always, guys. And see you soon. Bye.
Cheers, my man.
Cheers. Bye-bye.